Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. In the few times that we've gotten together previously, I have learned so much from our next guest. And initially, I thought we were going to interview a writing coach to help you, with your communication. Well, certainly she does that. She runs way deeper into the spiritual side, the neuroplasticity side, what the brain is doing, how it's working. Goes a lot deeper than just writing. Going to learn a lot today. She is the president and founder of the Marilyn Initiative. Years of understanding this, helping people with their communication. She even has a system that she developed with all of this. Couple of books too that are doing fantastic, especially one that just got published. Marilyn Horowitz is back on the program with us. How are you doing today?
I'm a happy girl.
The word of the day. Initially, again, you see these things. I'm thinking it's the word of the day. Maybe the word resilience, or it's a lot more than that. That was actually a book. Tell us about that one. We've talked about your other book a few times. Yeah. By the way, that one, Amazon, what is the category that one was number one or still is?
Cooking humor.
Bad Girl Pie is the name of that book.
Right. Cooking humor. It's about a ghostwriter of celebrity cookbooks who has adventures and has a very unique take on the world, and she's a lot of fun.
So the word of the day, how would you describe that book?
Well, the book was a result of the webinars I showed you. I think last time we spoke that during the pandemic, my population of writers, we're used to sheltering at home. The problem was now everybody was staying home with us, right? So it was the opposite problem that most people have. We were not lonely. We were interrupted, and so I decided to start using this proprietary technique, which I hadn't used in my class. I mean, minimally, but in my private work, one of the reasons I had such a high success rate is by getting people to use this technique, they were very self-connected, and a lot of the usual, tropes like, writer's block and stuff just didn't happen because we just basically rewired the brain, is a very simple way to put it, without doing a lot of work. So the word of the day came out of that book, and this company in England called John Hunt found my manuscript. My assistant sent it out to a bunch of different publishers. And they're a company that is known for only publishing material that has a lot of integrity. They're sort of an anti-publisher. So I was very flattered to be invited to be part of that. So that's how the book got actually published. But the secret sauce, which is, you can give it away because everybody's different, right? Like that's the, right? Like, you're one of a kind, just like everybody else, right? That's that.
I'm detecting that the word of the day is a book for anybody who wants to write creatively. But it can be an established writer. It could be somebody who's just starting out. Maybe they're aspiring to write a book, fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter. Would you say that was your goal in writing that book, to help people transform the way they write?
Yes. And because I'm a writing expert and I have an academic background, and my, part of my credentials are, I've been professor at NYU for 25 years. It seemed good to focus on an area that I had, obvious expertise. We're going to put it that way. I mean, really, what I've done for all these years is really been sort of like a change agent, because of coming in and saying, well, great, you're going to write the screenplay, but you're spending an hour and a half reading the work every day. How are you going to do that? That's where the entertainment business background comes in, because it's practical. It's like, okay, so, it takes a while to do this. And like any other enterprise, you have to bracket for all of the stops and starts, like life, children, bills and all that. Sure. And so the answer to your question is that the book is intended for anybody who wants to write. It is positioned to be people who want to write fiction, nonfiction, or long form pieces or short stories. But the fact of the matter is that if you use the techniques, especially if you make them part of your everyday life, we all have become writers since the onset of the internet. Anybody who thinks they're not a writer, has been asleep in the bed, because everybody writes all day long. Text, all the things we used to do this way, we do this way, right? So, and everything is a story. Everything has a beginning, middle, and it has a narrative. But however simple it is, what do you want to order? You want to have pizza or Subway? It's a story. But the most simple request. And the idea is that once we get into the neurobiology and the neuroscience of this, the story stops being like a thing that we do, and it becomes central to our self-concept of who we are. And who we think we are at any given moment determines the outcome of whatever it is that we're doing. So it's pretty serious business. And the more that I work with that, and I spent 17 years in therapy. I'm certified in things, bizarre things like Kundalini Yoga, which I spent 17 years practicing, and Reiki and Alexander and all of these modalities. And my mentor was this guy named Gene Genlin, who wrote this amazing book called Focusing, Knowing People Do. It's a body center. He was like the first psychologist to ever ask, how come some of my patients get better and some of mine don't? My kind of guy. And he answered the question for himself. And I guess I probably have been carrying the torch and answering that question for myself for a long time. So the answer to your question is yes. Yes, we all have to write. Wouldn't it be better if we could do it more easily and better with less rewrites and less agony?
I love that you run deep with whether it's energy, whether it's neuroscience, screenwriter, professor. Obviously, you're a book author. With this particular book, you've come up with this unique way of helping people write using one word of the day. Can you give us a little, more of a background on how that concept works using one word?
Sure. Well, the idea is that we have, again, this is simplistic. This is theoretical. So we're going to assume that we're using a metaphor on a storyteller. So I can be talking about a religion or anything else. So in this context, we have several parts of our brain. Most notably, we have 3 different parts of our brain. One is the emotional part of our brain, one is the reptile part of our brain, and one is the neocortex, which is where we think. And the 3 of them do not go at the same speed. It's the most simple way to put it, right? So it's like, trying to drive your car, in the wrong gear, basically, most of the time. And that's why we have so much trouble. So the problem is that these different parts of our brains were developed at different times, and they reason. They all have an ability to reason and make stories, but they all do them in a different way. So the reptile brain is strictly on the defense, right? Because you're in the cave, you want to make sure and that's the part of you that never wants to change. It says, well, so what if you're unhappy? You're still alive. Like, what's your problem? Right? And then you have the emotional brain, which processes your emotions. And remember, the thing that people don't really allow themselves to know up front is that every thought every word provokes a feeling. And that feeling is what actually happens in the outer world. Even if it's not a direct correlation, it's not like you think of winning the lottery and you win the lottery, but you become more hopeful, it changes your mood. And we've never been taught to address the fact that these 2 parts don't get along. Now, that would be fine, but our neocortex operates at 3 times the speed. It doesn't develop until we're older than the other parts. Physically, we become chronologically older, which is why teenagers suffer so much, because their reasoning abilities are not developed. And now we have a part of our brain that is not tethered into the body. And so it just goes crazy and it makes up stories. We're like little kids, we're like, oh, I can tell a story about this, or this happened to me and it's because of this. And, the whole nature of language and the cause and effect nature, because of this, then this happened. It would be fine if everything was perfect and we all lived, in Candyland type of a playbook, but we don't. And every time something happens, 3 parts of your brain interpret it differently, and they make up kind of slightly different stories. So that's why you get so much distortion. That's why your techniques that helped you when you were a kid, like you had bullies if you're like me, you're a little kid. So if anybody came near you, super ferocious because that was your only chance, right? But then if you grow up and you're too tough, then people back off and they're concerned about being friendly because they don't understand where that's coming from. It's not aggression, it's defensive. But it's misread. We all know people like that. They're going to say someone comes on too strong. Well, probably in the beginning, if they hadn't come on too strong, they would have had a lot of trouble as a child. And, so it's not a question of doing psychology in a traditional sense, which annoys me because this cause and effect, it's just another story on top of the story. So the short answer, of which this is not a short answer, is the reason you use one word is that most of your two parts of your brain, limbic and the emotional part of your brain, don't understand language because they were developed way before language. The limbic brain responds to language, but it's not a direct correlation. The reptile brain, forget about it. So what do they understand? Well, the limbic brain interprets stories as feelings, right? So you have to cut through that and find a way to communicate with that part without letting it make a story. Does that make sense? That was the hard part. So you get right into the plug instead of having to, go through a fuse breaker and a fuse, it's like, oh, how do I get to that part of me that is the center of me? Where's my deeper part, right? Which according to Descartes, by the way, who thought existed in the pineal gland. That's another interesting piece of trivia for someone who was the thinker of thinkers. He thought there was actually a physical connection in the brain between the soul and the mind. Interesting side note. So the one word cuts through all three brains. It slows down the neocortex and forces it to create an image, which slows it down. The limbic brain connects to the image and responds with its feelings, which can be manipulated in both a positive and negative way. And then your reptile brain assesses the threat. And if there's no story, the reptile brain can be objective. As long as there's a story, it's going to refer to an old pattern, just like we all do. What happened yesterday? So it's necessary to cut through all these layers to get people to be able to plug directly into themselves.
How do you determine that word?
Well, if you just shut up for half a second, your emotional brain will give you the word because your emotional brain controls how everything really is. So you without even looking at me, you said resilience, right? Now, I would say on balance that you've been dealing with something lately that required more than your usual, perseverance, patience, and other good qualities. It required something additional. And you never gave yourself any credit. But in that moment where I made a space, you went resilient. So now if you focus in right now, you're going to see, yeah, I've been extra resilient lately. Isn't that great? And you see how you get a smile and your thought changes and they calm down. Take a breath.
It's almost as it's a disarming technique, using that word that resonates. And by the way, while we're talking about words, I don't do New Year's resolutions. I do words for the year.
Great.
My word for last year was resilience because there were some things I powered through. And in my journey, like many of us, we realized, wow, I got more resilience than I thought. I got more in me than I ever imagined. This year, my word is execution. Lots of ideas, get it done. Let's go. Let's get it done. I want to look at common issue that many of us have, proverbial writer's block. And that can be anything. You got to write an email. I got to think about this email and it's kind of important. Let me put that aside and go back. Is writer's block essentially fear? And we talked about the reptilian brain. That's protecting you in the fear. Is essentially why we get to a point where I just can't be creative. I'm not thinking. Is it essentially coming back to fear? We're afraid of maybe failure, fear of it not hitting the mark for us or somebody else.
I have a very one thing to say, and I hope you won't mind, which is the whole problem is who cares? The whole problem is we get fixated on the what and the why as opposed to what are we going to do about it. So your word is execution. So the answer is, yeah, it's fear. And yeah, it may be, I'll tell you a quick story. So when I first started, one of the reasons I was able to get a lot of work was because I could cure writer's block in a session. Wow, I don't care how much you charge, come and see me. So here's what I would do. Okay, this is giving away. So they come in, they'd be telling me all their troubles. I can't write, I'm not creative, I have 6 children and 12 jobs and whatever. And I'd say, well, this is really terrible. And I have one of those faces where people, feel that I'm being empathetic and supportive. And then I would just push a little piece of paper, which I had written, back then I used a square, I changed to a circle. And in the middle was a square just large enough to write a phrase or sentence. And I said, well, just, while you're telling me all your troubles, could you just write something? And invariably they would write something. And I would say, well, obviously your problem is not writer's block, because you just wrote.
Not writer's block, but it's what?
It's not writer's block because you just wrote something. Whatever the problem you're having is, it's not writer's block. So let's stop pathologizing about what your story you're telling yourself, and let's figure out what's going on. You have to cut through the story that's making up the story that's making up the story. That's where this works. And my gift, because I have been studying it for so long, is I know right where the real problem is. I know where the actual problem is usually before you tell me. And I'm not unique. We all know this. We just don't want to look at it for various reasons. It's not convenient. I mean, things happen. I stopped smoking and I got divorced. I knew that part of the reason that I smoked was because every time I got upset, it was a circuit breaker, and I would just check out. And I knew that if I stopped smoking, I probably would be so angry that I probably would divorce I forget which husband number it was. And I did. And I made a reasoned decision that it was worth my physical health. And as a postscript, my mother died of lung cancer. So I obviously had made a good decision. But the price tag was very high, and we don't want to make those, we're afraid to know those things about ourselves. And that's where we suffer. So writer's block, my experience with writer's block, for people who are trying to write something specific, it's a problem of not doing research. It's that old, stupid story of sitting there until, blood forms on your forehead or whatever Ernest Hemingway said about it. The answer, the cure for writer's block is research. Okay? The cure for writer's block is to take a different stance. I don't have writer's block. I'm just a smart person. I don't want to waste my time writing until I know what I'm writing about. That's the reframe.
I find it fascinating how this goes way deeper than just writing. This is fundamentally what makes us tick, if you will. And this gets all exposed when these things come up, even something as natural as writing. These things get all identified. There's a lot more. And I agree with you 1,000,000,000%. Everything is a story. We have a story. Our story varies from day to day. Walking into a Starbucks, there's a story there. You just got a cup of coffee. Everything is a story. What challenges you?
My own story. trying to figure out how I'm still, keeping myself small, basically. It's that quote that is attributed to Marianne Williamson, but is actually the quote from Nelson Mandela, who said that, I'm paraphrasing, what we fear is not that we're great, it's that we're small, but that we're great. And we keep ourselves small because it's safer. That's that little thing I told you about, the venule, that part of our brain that doesn't want us to fail or get killed. Right? So someone like me who had a pretty bad childhood and was really made to feel, invisible and like a nothing burger, I have to fight that every single day. I'm working on my new book, The Marilyn Essentials. I'm trying to explain how I developed the system. It's taken me 2 years to actually fess up, one of the reasons I'm smart is that when I was 12, I started reading as soon as I could read, when I was 6 or 7, my mother had this big wall of books. She was a philosophy professor. And I just read, I started with the story of O on the top, and I read down to the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And, on the way I read Kant and Wittgenstein and Kierkegaard. And, the little bit that I retained made me increasingly intelligent. And I just have never owned that. And finally I thought, at a certain point, Marilyn, you really are, you are a bookworm. It's what you always really were. You always wanted to be, my name is Marilyn, so I always wanted to be more, but I'm really just a big bookworm. That's what I am, And I'm also, I come from, a conservative Jewish lineage, and my grandparents wrote a book called Faith and Reason, which is 2 lawyers reconciling Christianity and Judaism in 200 pages. And, that's the basis for my self-concept, but I've always been in denial. See, because I was told that I was not important. I was like a poor relative. I was not treatable as a child. And so, I took it in, and every day I get up and the story comes right back up. You hear me, I'm talking about it now. If I think about it, it comes right back up and I have to go, down boy, that's old. That's not, I'm not going to. And the idea is the words make the feeling which reproduces the memory, right? So the cure is not to say those words and not to think about those things in a very studied way, not like a positive thinking, not like putting a Band-Aid on an empty gas tank and saying, Marilyn, you're probably going to talk about this on the show. It's going to take you a half hour when you get off to recover your equilibrium. Just know that. Go in, understand that if you go over to that story, you don't get out of it right away. It takes a while. You'll have to go for a walk or whatever it is that I do. But I'm saying, so that's the level. And once you start to have that awareness of yourself, then things like writer's block become ridiculous in the sense that there's a cure. Yes, okay, I can't write, but maybe it's because I'm smart. Maybe I don't know what I want to say. Maybe I don't know how to write this email. Maybe it's good that I'm not writing and I'm not forcing myself, because maybe I'm going to alienate the hell out of the person I'm sending it to.
Thank you for saying that, because many times when we're challenged, writer's block, if you will, we beat on ourselves.
Yeah.
But if you reframe it, I'm not writing at the moment because I have so many great ideas. I can't pick which one I want. I have to work. I have to sit with myself on that one. Yeah. Or, it's amazing how you reframe things. And also, I think a lot of that comes in trust. Trusting in yourself, trusting that, I've written some stuff before. I can do this again. I think we lose track of that.
The manual says, well, you didn't do it as good as you should have. We are so, society makes us so sure that we're going to fail that most of us, we just go. So my practical tip for you, since you asked me for one, is when you get off the show, if you have 2 minutes, set a timer, make a big cluster like the one in my book, which is a circle in the middle and circles around it, 4 or 5 circles around it attached by lines. And in the middle, put execution. And then in each one of these categories, without making judgment, you may need more than 2 minutes. Just put in one circle what each thing is that you want to accomplish. Dental appointments, memoir. The trick is not to get on top of yourself and say, well, that's not important. That's what kills you. You have to just go, all right, I'm just going to do a brain dump, pardon my vulgarity. And I am going to just, I'm just going to put, I have all these circles. I can't lose anything. I'm not trying to do it up here. On this page, you can take more paper, make a large page. I do this and, it turns into a map because I have so much stuff that I want to accomplish. But then after a few minutes, I tell myself a story, and that's the secret. You take a couple of these words and you make a story and say, well, actually, Steve, I'm quite resilient. And my word for last year was resilient, and I did good on that. I acted on that, different software. And now it's years of execution. Look, I've just done this gigantic map of everything I want to accomplish. And I can see objectively that I can't accomplish everything because you can only be in one place at one time so far. Once they clone you and you have robots, we can change that. But right now, there's only one you and one piece of time. Right. And so then you can make a determination about what you're going to do with the time in that moment. And then what happens is once you get in the habit of doing that, that's really the best meditation I've ever found. What am I going to do now? Not how much time do I have or what time is it, but okay, what is it that is the most important thing for me to do now? And just that constant meditation and then having this big constellation of everything you could ever think of, it's so relaxing.
Well, powerful in that the word now is, I believe, everything, and harnessing the power of living in the now, whereby you take a look at that roadmap of things you might want to accomplish. It can become overwhelming. What can we do now? We're out of time. We keep going here.
I'm going to leave you with a quote that's very useful. That you can
Please.
And the quote is that the 2 thieves of life are the past and the future. They will rob you of everything you actually have.
I think that bears repeating.
The 2 thieves that will destroy your life are the past and the future. They will steal all you have, and all we really have is time. That's the only thing we actually have.
I'm gonna remember that one for a long time and share that with others, because that was in my journey. That was the game changer. Where somebody said, "Why don't you live in the present?" And I had no idea what they were talking about. It took me months to figure it out, to be honest with you. And when I did it, and they even said at that moment, "You live in the past, you live in the future. Why aren't you enjoying now?" Didn't even know what it meant. And I guess I was allowing myself to be robbed of the wonderful thing we call now.
Yes, that's what we're supposed to. That's all of our training is set up to loot our own lives. Gary.
If somebody wants to make some changes in their life, maybe improve their writing, ultimately improve the way they look at things in life, how do we find you, Marilyn?
My website is marilynhorowitz.com. And I host a free webinar. The next one is on September 10th. You can register through Eventbrite on my website. I'm on vacation for 2 weeks, but my newsletter resumes. And then there are lots of these tips and tricks. There are lots of resources. I've written 8 books. You can find me on Amazon. My new book, which is called Bad Girl Pie, is hopefully a very amusing and empowering journey back to discovering your true self. So we need to be inspired by laughing.
Thank you for today. A lot of realizations here. And yeah, the story, everything is a story, including the negative stories we tell ourselves on a minute-by-minute basis. We need to move away from that ASAP. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Good stuff today.
Okay, I look forward to next week. It'll be really fun.
Likewise. We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Adopt US Kids presents Multiple Choice Parenting.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes?
How could he do this to you? And for Sheila, she has split ends.
B, console her?
Oh, sweetie, this is going to happen a lot. 4, maybe 5 more times before you get married.
C, take charge?
Got to get this all straightened out. Give a little talking to, man to man, mano a mano. Hey, Steve! Is now a good time? No? Okay, no problem. Bye.
Or D, help her find a new boyfriend?
I know a great place to meet boys. The internet. Nice, single boys. Never mind. How about some ice cream?
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
For more information on how you can adopt, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.